Hey guys, today we're going to start a new series of videos for the TEAS review, and this one's going to be on math. So as many of you know, we've got a whole separate series for science, but we're going to do a math series here. And I will say I am science background based. I've got a lot of college math. I'm not really a quote-unquote math expert, but one of the key things I want to hit home here with the TEAS regarding math is that really is basic math. It's basic algebra, and it's really what you should be able to do straight from high school. That doesn't mean you don't need to review, and that's the whole purpose of this video. But we're just going to go over some basics here, try to remember some of the things that are going to be important. The first one being to remember first category that we're going to go over here is order of operations. And Pindus is the first thing to remember. Some people might learn it or taught it as please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. But it's just the order in which we do stuff in math. And of course, that's the secret with math is you've got to follow a specific order and you can't deviate from that. And as long as you follow the steps in the right order, you should theoretically, you do everything right, you should theoretically get the right answer. So that's the key thing. Key thing to remember in this section 2 of the TEAS on the test is that you can't use a calculator. And that's what makes it the toughest. A lot of these questions are not hard, but then you gotta, do long division or you gotta do, a long multiplication problem, and it just takes time. And you might know very easily how to do that, but of course, you make a little mistake here or there. So truth is, you just gotta practice some of these problems. I'm just gonna make some up here and throw some out there to you, and just try not to make little errors. The good news is that you've got answer choices that you can draw from, and that really helps. So of course, this stands for parentheses, exponents, multiplication and division, and then addition and subtraction. So I just try to remember these two together, right? You're going to do anything in parentheses first. You're going to do anything right after that if you have an exponent, right? Something that's like squared, for instance. And then your multiplication and division comes after that. So anytime you have multiplication and division, you do that before you do your addition and subtraction. Addition and subtraction would be the last thing you would do, okay? So you always have to remember that order. So use a good example here. Throw out some questions to go by here. We have the first question here we're going to do. We're going to start with whatever's in parentheses. So we're going to start with 5 plus 1, of course, is 6. That's going to give us the first part of that, right? That's our first set of parentheses. Then we're going to do the bigger set of parentheses here. Now you're going to see it's 5 plus 3 times 6. We're going to do that, which even without the parentheses, we would still want to do that first because it is multiplication, which comes before addition and subtraction. But we're going to do this, which is going to leave us, of course, with the answer, okay? So 5, addition's the very end of it, right? And then, of course, I always say probably the smart thing to do is literally add it, because if it's me, I'm going to make a mistake a lot of times. The big thing on a lot of these questions is you got to move quickly. We move quickly in these videos, and of course you've got to move quickly. So let's do another one here, which is going to be some that I've made up. So here again, we're going to do what's in parentheses first, okay? And this is order of operations questions. So we're going to do that. That's going to be a 3. But then look how we're going to rewrite this question. Now it's 3 squared, right? So that becomes parentheses first, exponent second, right? So 3 times 3, right? 3 squared is going to give us 9. And then, of course, the last thing we do is addition in this case, and that gives us our answer, okay? In the case of a question like this, where it's multiplication and division only, okay, so we'll throw out this one here. We can just do this left to right, so that makes it fairly straightforward. We can kind of simplify things a little bit here. 1 times 9 is 9. And then, of course, 3 times 2 is 6. Of course, this is not going to be, it's literally going to be 6 divided into 9, which is, again, if you do the, math here, it's going to give us, it's going to give us a decimal, or we could do it is, 1 and 3/6, which would be equals, we'll simplify it, 1 1/2. That would be the answer. Some of these are going to come out this way on the test, and they're not going to be these like perfect whole numbers. They're going to be weird fractions that need to always be simplified, okay? And that's the key thing to remember. And anytime you come up with a fraction, and let's say it's, especially if it's something like, just throwing something out, 15 over 12, they're going to want it in this type of answer. They're not going to want this larger number over the smaller base number here. They're not going to give you a choice like that. You're going to have to hunt for the most simplified answer, which is going to be a whole number and a fraction. So keep that in mind. That's the way I just did this particular question is the most simplified. It could be 1.5 or whatever too, but that is the answer, and that's usually the way they're going to look for it. So keep that in mind. Let's do another question. Also easy, but we can't do this one left to right. That's why I threw this down here. If we have 1 plus 5 times 3, it's a plus there. You might want to do this left to right, right? This looks like, okay, you might do it, but what is our rules? With Pindus, we have to do a multiplication first. So it's really going to be 1 plus 15. The correct answer is going to be 16. Okay, so it's going to be 1 plus, we're going to do the 15 first. Okay, so that is key to remember there. So that's just some quick order of operations, and the truth is there's a lot of information on that. You have to really practice, okay, correct order, correct order, correct order. If you do things out of order, you're going to get the wrong answer, okay? If I do this out of order, the answer is wrong. And that's where you're going to make a lot of mistakes. So practice order of operations a lot. Next thing we're going to go over is really simple. I think anyway, just subtracting whole numbers, and that's the category that they have. It's just getting you to subtract large whole numbers. So, they'll have numbers like 639 minus, I'm just making, again, something up, minus 58, and they're just going to get you to subtract. And, in this case, 581 is the answer, and again, making sure that, you pay attention to, positive and negatives. But that's a category that they're going to test you on. That isn't hard. It's just, again, you don't have a calculator, so you can't type these numbers in. You've got to go very slowly and work through the problem, okay? And that's the big thing, okay? So I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on that, but realize that you just have to practice subtracting some of these large numbers, okay? Another thing, and that's probably one of the trickiest coming up next, is word problems. And the key thing I think on a lot of these word problems, going back to when I took a lot of math in college, was that they're easy. They're really easy, and what you're looking for in word problems is you're really looking for key words. It's a long sentence, and you're just picking out the key things, and so sometimes underlining those key words is key. So example would be, giving you a word problem like a person has, a small backyard and it's 25 feet, by 25 feet, right? So if you pictured it, sometimes drawing things out is the best way to picture this. So we know, and this is not drawn to scale, of course, but we know that 25 by 25 is going to look like this, and they're asking, how much would it cost to install a fence, okay? If the fence is $10 a linear foot, okay? And I guess I don't need to put the linear part in there, but linear foot just means every foot you're paying $10 for, right? It's not a square foot, it's a linear foot, right? Because the fence is in linear feet. So how do you do that? Well, you're literally just going to add up 25 plus 25 plus 25 plus 25, right? It's not just 2 of them, right? It's going to be 4 of them because it's going to be all the way around in this case, okay? Or they might give you something like a garden or something like that, because obviously some houses you're not going to fence all 4 sides, but in this case I'm just going to say it's going to be all 4 sides. So really it's going to be 25 plus 25 plus 25 plus 25, which isn't that bad. It's, you can kind of do the math, it's going to be 100. And then you're going to, once you add that up, then you're going to multiply by 10. That gives you, we do the math, $1,000. That is the cost, okay? That's not a real hard question. It's, you know, I'm picking kind of easy numbers here. The numbers could be a little bit trickier, $12 a linear foot, whatever. These could be off a little bit, but that's what you're doing, okay? Is you're just thinking about the question. Every word problem is different, and you do, the thing is, you can't just say, I'm going to take the numbers and multiply them all together. I'm taking numbers, I'm going to divide. What you've got to do is you've got to think about it and say, well, what do I need to do to arrive at the answer? Think about it. Draw it out if you have to. Another good example is they might do something like, we've got a person that needs 200 milligrams of medication. You know, this is a good clinical question anyway. Somebody needs 200 milligrams of medication, but they've only got 50 milligram tablets, right? So the tablets here are 50 milligrams. So the question is, how many tablets do they need, right, to give a person a 200 milligram dose? Well, in this case, of course, we're going to divide 50 into 200, right? That's going to give us exact number of 4, right, perfectly. So the answer would be, of course, 4 tablets per dose, right, of 200 milligrams. So that's another question. We have to think about it a little bit. I mean, you can't just take the numbers and multiply them, or take them and divide. In this case, yes, division would work, but you have to think about it a little bit. That's the key thing with the word problems. Again, there's lots of word problems out there to practice, but it's the key thing, I believe, is just really thinking about it a little bit. What do I need to do, or what can I draw, right? Maybe what you do is it's 50 milligrams, so you say, okay, one tablet's 50, another tablet's 100, you know, and you just draw the tablets out until you get to 200. Whatever it takes to help you see the best method, okay? So moving on here, we're going to go to fractions. Fractions can be so tricky for so many people, and there is a section on this test on fractions where you're going to have to either add or subtract, okay, which are going to be done basically the same, versus multiply and divide. So good example is we'll start with add, addition, and subtraction first. We'll just start with an example here of an addition question. And the key thing anytime we're adding, subtracting, is that we have to simplify if possible, right? So simplifying always helps. And then also, in this case, there's nothing to simplify, but also we always need to have a common denominator, the least common denominator, okay? So in this case, it's going to be 6. 6 is going to be the least common denominator. So I'm going to rewrite this question. We're going to leave this alone because it's already got the least common denominator 6, but 3 can be obviously multiplied by 2 to also get 6. So what would we need to divide with 3 again, or divide into 6, I guess I'd say, from 3 to get, and that would be 2, right? 3 times 2 is 6, so that is going to be 2 times 1 is 2. So we're going to set it up like that. I hope that makes sense. That's how we arrive at the least common denominator for this question. Once we come to this, then we can, of course, add it up. We keep that common denominator all the way across. And then, of course, we're going to add only the top. Okay, if it's a subtraction question, we'd subtract from the top. Okay, but here it's an addition, so 2 plus 1 is 3. That's the answer, but of course, like we said, for anything, with fractions, we've got to simplify. So we can simplify by, again, 3 dividing into 6 2 times. So that brings us down to 1/2. So that would be the answer that they'd be looking for, okay? Let's do another one. We'll do it right here. Because they'll have a lot of fraction questions like this, where you'll have 2 minus 2 and 1/3. Now, another big thing is you might see a question like this, and if you think about it for a minute, wait a second, I know the answer to this because it's 2 minus 2 1/3, which means it's going to be a negative number, right? This number is bigger, so it's going to wind up with a negative number. So that's something that you can always look at when you're doing math problems. Just look at the big picture. But we want to go through the steps, and you want to rewrite this equation by taking 3 times 2 is 6 plus 1 is 7. So you want to rewrite it like this, okay? So I'm going to rewrite the question like this. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for, again, same thing we did up here, lowest common denominator, okay? And that is going to be the 3. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 3 here, and it's 3 times 2 is 6. Put a 6 right there, okay? So then I'm going to subtract. Notice it's going to be a negative number. So we're going to bring our denominator all the way across, and we're going to be a negative 1/3. That makes sense because I could have looked at the question and figured out that that was actually going to be a negative 1/3. But this definitely confirms that this is the process for finding it, okay? It's a negative 1/3. So a lot of times, if you find a fraction in this form, you're definitely going to have to break it into a full fraction, okay? Not a whole number in fraction. So keep that in mind as you're working through this problem. And we can do another one here. I've got one more written down. Let's clean this up real fast. So again, 1 5/8 times 2 and 1/7. So notice we have shifted. We're not doing addition and subtraction anymore. We're now doing multiplication. Okay? So we switch to that. So how do we rewrite this? 8 times 1 is 8 plus 5 is 13. So we're going to rewrite this in a fraction. 7 times 2 is 14 plus 1 is 15. Okay? So we've rewritten this equation, given us fractions, and then what we're going to do is multiply. So what I can do is I can simplify, not this particular question, but any question that allows me to simplify. I can simplify by seeing if 7 goes into 13 at all. Let's say this was a 14 right here. I could actually put a 1 here and make this a 2. And then I could do the same thing over here. Let's say this was a 24 over here. I could put a 1 here and put a 3 over here. Okay? So in this case, I can't do that. I can't simplify anymore. I mean, that's basically as simplified as it is. So how do we do this? Well, we're just going to multiply. Okay? So in this case, it's going to be 56 going across the top. It's going to be, and I've already done this, you know, again, this tricky part is you don't have a calculator, so you just have to do multiplication, make sure you get it right. That's our answer, but like we said before, that can be simplified. So to do all of the simplification, you figure out if you can simplify this more and then put it back into our original whole number / fraction. And when we do that, this is what we come up with. It is a very kind of odd number, but that's the answer. That's what they'd be looking for. Okay. Some of these are going to be weird like that. You might think, well, that just doesn't sound right, but that's what they're looking for. Okay. Let's do a division. That was a multiplication. Now, for division, very unique thing that we can do for division is anytime we have a division, yes, we can try to simplify. And there's no opportunity to do that here. But once we're done and it's simplified as much as possible, all we have to do to rewrite this, okay, is we're going to rewrite this by making a multiplication problem out of it, just like that. We're literally going to invert the second number and then just simply multiply it. So that's going to be 15 over 12. Okay, so when we break that down, we simplify it. We can simplify it into 5/4, and then yes, we're going to come to our final answer, 1 1/4. Okay, that's what they're looking for. Okay, so you've got to practice these a little bit. Multiplication and division fractions. Okay, so moving on a little bit, let's go over decimals real fast. Decimals can be tricky as well. What they'll do for decimals, and really what you have to do is, again, they're going to give you typically multiplication type questions for decimals. Okay, you have to really pay attention to the placement of the decimal. In this case, this is a multiplication question. You're just going to do normal multiplication. The tricky part is where do I put the decimal when I'm all done? And so you can see 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 4 is 12. 3 times 5 is 15, but I add 1 to it, so 16. 1626. So the question then is, where do I put my decimal? Well, you simply count the places. There's 2 shifts here, right? So 2 places. This would be tenths, hundreds, and then tenths here as well. So 1, 2, 3 places for the decimal. So 1, 2, 3. That's the answer, okay, for the decimal. So that's multiplication, and similar for division. Now, there's a little trick for division I can show you here. If we divided, let me do this. So this is 20.28 divided by 1.2. Okay, so we're dividing literally the 1.2 into 0.28. So how would we write this? We can actually, in this case, we can shift everything over 1 decimal. That will actually make it a little bit easier. It will give us a 12 for this one and a 2.8 for this. So that when we do this, it's going to simplify things a little bit. So 24, if you notice, would be what we would get from this, and it would actually go in this place. Sorry, the 2 would go over the 2 there. Notice our decimal is right here, so that when we put our next number in there, okay, it's going to be 36, it's a 2.3. There's different ways to do this, but that's the way that, I always did it myself. Again, I might not be explaining this as well as a math teacher would, but these are the type of questions that they're going to be looking for. If you continue to go, you're going to find out that it's a 2.33333. Okay, that's where you put the decimal. Okay, there are other ways to do it. You could take, all the decimals out and then do the same type of 1, 2, 3 movement of the decimal place, but it's much easier and consistent to do it this way. So I hope that helps. Another section they're going to quiz you on, in addition to decimals, is percent. So this is the last one we're going to talk about for the moment. And percent you're going to basically make into decimals, okay? So if we said the question was 10% of, okay, I guess I should put the percent over here, make more sense. 10% of 500, okay? Well, that would technically be, if we just looked at this, you can just do the math really easy with 10%. It's going to be 50, okay? But we're going to go through the process here of doing it. So I always convert the percentage into a decimal. How do we do that? With a percent, we always move 2 decimal places, okay? So that's like saying 500 times 0.10. That's really what we're saying here. And you say, well, 0.10 is really just 0.1, but it's best to kind of walk through it this way. It makes sure you're always going to do it the right way, and I'll show you why. We know we're going to multiply the 0 3 times, and all we're going to get is 3 zeros, okay? Then we move to the second number. We put a 0 there to begin with, and then start with the 1. 1 times 0, 0. 1 time, so I'll put it 1 times 0 again is 0. And then 1 times 5 is 5. There you go. So then our answer is 5,000, but again, we count over 2 decimals. There it is, 50. Okay, so 10% of 500 is 50. Sometimes the easiest way to practice this is practice on an easy set of numbers that you already know the answer to. Right? If this was 10% of 1,000, you know the answer is going to be 100. Okay, right off the bat, the answer is 100. Then go through the process of doing the math and see if you arrive at 100. And if you're arriving at 100, doing it the right way, then you know you can arrive at any number. Okay. Same thing. You do 25%. I've got another one of 4. So we do the same thing again. Doesn't matter how we multiply it. We're going to put the 25 on top, so it's 0.25 times 4. I'm doing that because it just saves a little math. 4 times 5 is 20. Carry the 2, so that's 8, 9, 10. So that comes to 100, and then what do? We move 2 decimal places. 1, 2. So the answer is 1, right? 25% of 4 is 1. And if you did the math or just looked at it, you know, not having to do the math, you just looked at it, it makes sense. That's just going to be 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, right? That would be 25%. So I hope that helps, but these are the type of questions you're going to see, and I'm going to continue to go over every single section of math here so that you see every type of question possible on the test, okay? All of these are not hard. They're all things I know you've had. It's just a matter of remembering how to do them, okay? So look for more in our second series video here. For now, good luck and good study.